What's happening to Boeing right now?
Yeah.
Long living institutions have some secret mantra. Companies are living beings. We never think about valuation. We think of how are we creating value.
Ajit, now let me come to the second and one of the favorite sections, and that's about institution building. I really want to go deep in this topic with your experiences that you have had. Start with, why do companies today struggle to get beyond 50? And many of them, well before 50, they die.
You know, I always like to take a metaphor. In my grandfather's time, if you lived till 60,
Yeah.
it was considered a good age.
Yeah.
And nowadays, the number is not 60, but 90 maybe.
Yeah.
With the progress of time in human life, mortality has increased, or old age has increased. With companies, it's exactly the opposite. Back in the 50s, when Fortune 500 started publishing, companies like US Steel, IBM, GE, Boeing were top companies with the life of 100 years maybe
Yeah.
at that time.
Yeah.
The Fortune 500 list has become very dynamic and nobody stays there for long. So it's the opposite. Mortality has come down. And it's a good question to ask, why do companies die?
Yeah.
And I felt inspired to inquire, why do human beings die? Whether it's a 60 or 80 is a separate matter. And what researchers say is something that appeals to your common sense. They die because you don't have one organ that fails, but that leads to a kick-on effect. And the totality, the system collapses. So we say people die of a heart attack, but actually heart, there's blood pressure behind it, behind that there's diabetes, there are multiple things. Same thing happens in companies. It's not one particular scam of a finance department or marketing department. It's been building up. And multiple things start to fail until the whole thing collapses. When you look at all the great collapses, once it's done, after 3 years, when people write case studies, you'll find a number of things. Their customer sensitivity was not poor, their cost control was not going right. And you can see the case of what's happening to Boeing right now.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the fantastic companies, but seems to be plagued with a whole lot of diseases. How do you deal with it
Yeah.
if you're running a company?
Yeah.
And it's like the human body. There are some good habits and there are some bad habits. Maximize the good habits and minimize the bad habits.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the human body, you know the answers.
Yeah.
Have exercise, etc., and bad habits, don't smoke, etc. But not all of us follow it.
Yeah.
We may know. So knowledge of how life is extended doesn't result in the actual actions being taken. That's what happens in companies. Once these three ideas sit in your head with the human body, you can apply it to companies. Maximize good habits, minimize bad habits, and remember it's a system failure and not a single organ. In a company, it's exactly the same. Maximize good habits, minimize bad habits, and remember it's a system failure. You start seeing the symptoms in multiple ways as you go along.
Yeah.
It's the failure to recognize those that causes companies to collapse. So you may say, for example, that IBM missed the PC revolution. You may say IBM missed seeing that hardware was toast and software is going to take over. But in hindsight, it's very easy. At that time, what did you do?
Yeah.
So I think it's very important to understand that long living institutions have some secret mantra. I call it Ikigai or Ayurveda. They then learned how to live long. And that has fascinated me, especially after my retirement, because I found I had Luckily for me, not due to any, at least I didn't make them collapse. Hindustan Lever is a long living institution. Another few years, it will be 100 years in India.
Want to come to that.
And Tata, the 156 years.
Yeah.
So I wrote and studied non-Lever, non-Tata companies first.
Interesting.
And I wrote to 10 CEOs. This is about 6-7 years ago, along with some academics from the SP Jain Institute. I said, you came into existence after I began my career. So I can call you sort of middle-aged, 40, 50, 30, 40, 50 years. Kotak Bank, HDFC, Marico, Biocon, even TCS wasn't existent when I began my career. And 5-6 of them agreed to participate in a research methodology, which the academic partner and I did together. And we wrote 5-6 books on each of these. And if I had to convert it into Brahma Mantra, into one page, I found that there were 3 practices which were absolutely essential, and 5 practices which are a bit optional, a bit flexible.
Okay.
Like a golfer says, you must have a driver, you must have a putter, and you must have one chipper.
Yeah.
The rest of it you can manage.
Yeah.
What are the 3 essential practices? First is people. First is people. You must spend an enormous amount of time on people and skills and everything that goes with people. And people doesn't necessarily mean employees, it means vendors, relationships, all the whole cluster of things I capture in that word people. The second thing, which is very, very essential, is the ability to deal with short-term and long-term simultaneously. It's not one or the other. And when I hear young people today saying, oh boss, you're saying long term, I don't have time to breathe. If you see my day's work and I get calls in the night, I get tired at the end of the day. But that's a problem. If you keep that going on, then it won't work. So you must be able to deal with short and long term simultaneously.
Yeah.
And the third thing, which is absolutely essential, I'm not going to go into the 5 optional ones because
we can
it'll
read
get
through.
too long,
Yeah.
is to learn critical thinking. And I use the word critical thinking not in any academic sense. There are 2 kinds of people, 2 kinds of questions you can ask when you see an object. What is inside this? That's what I call the geologist approach. And the second is, what is this a part of? That's the astronomer's approach. And when you're in the first 15 years of your career, you're being rewarded for being a good geologist. In the second 15 years, you're being rewarded for being an astronomer.
Oh, that's phenomenal.
And you must make that
Switch.
click. The toggle switch must change.
Yeah.
And people fail to do it.
Yeah.
So they become CEO.
Yeah.
And they're still getting into
The
every single
geologist.
detail
Yeah.
by saying, what's inside this?
Yeah.
And you miss what it is a part of. So these are the 3 important skills: people, short-term, long-term, and critical
thinking.
And then there are 5 more.
Yeah.
And then we wrote 5-6 books.
Yeah.
One on each company, because we had a choice to write a fat 900-page book, which had all the 6 companies.
Yeah.
But we said this is not a scholarship of academic dissertation. It must be a slim thing which you can buy and carry on a flight and read. It must be experiential. So we wrote 6 books of 150 pages each rather than one big fat book of 900 pages. And then somebody said, hey, you worked in Levers and Tata. Have you retrofitted this model to...
Yeah, I'm just curious. Would that work?
And we wrote the book on Tata, which has just come out, called Jamshedji Tata, Lessons for Corporate Success.
Yeah.
And in fact, we didn't do quite a retrofit because that would be a bit of a bore
Yeah.
for people to read. We said, what is it that made Tata long life?
Yeah.
And we came to a list of 8 or 9 P's: perseverance, philosophy, purpose, people, etc., which we've written about in the book, to say that long-living companies have a purpose, a deeply rooted purpose, which doesn't change every decade with the CEOs changing, but stays. When Tata's began, Jamshedji Tata said that the company exists for the community. And he said this in 1880. Tata still works on the same principle. The words may change because the English language has become more polished. When William Hesketh Lever started Unilever or Lever, he said, "What is your purpose?" He said, "My purpose is there are millions of people all over the world. I want to keep cleaning them." And we haven't finished cleaning the millions all over the world. So he was implying that I want to be global, I want to clean people. Even today, if you look at what Lever does, it basically cleans people.
Yeah.
You may do it by cleaning the skin, you may clean it by cleaning the hair, and then you give it different
Oral or
names.
whatever, yeah.
Okay, Hindustan Lever is still basically cleaning
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
or beautifying them or whatever
Yeah.
you want to call it. So purpose is something that doesn't change all the time. It is something that's deeply moving you and you come back to it. And then there are other things like perseverance, having a philosophy. And really, I have constructed a model in my mind, which since I've developed it, I suppose I have a certain affinity to it. But I think it's worth sharing in your podcast.
Of course.
That imagine the Kaveri or the Ganga. They have a starting origin point. And at that origin point in Gangotri or Talakaveri, it is a little trickle of water. You never think it's going to be a mighty river. That is purpose. It stays throughout. Ganga may become bigger, smaller, Indus River may become bigger, smaller, it may dry up in some places, but that trickle remains. Purpose therefore remains constant. Then depending on the hydrology available, the river finds its own path until it comes to become a huge river. And there are civilizations that have come up at that river. So if you take the Ganga or the Kaveri, Tipu Sultan was here, the Cholas were here, the Pallavas came here, and there are stories and whole history books written about how on the banks of that river. And Ganga, of course, we all know, had many stories of Krishna Leela, Ram Leela, Mughal emperors, all sorts of things. So these stories I call the narratives. A river generates narratives, very rich narratives. You can write a whole beautiful book of pictures of the civilizations that have been spawned by the river.
Right.
Along with narratives come icons. Arjuna was the icon here.
Yeah.
Ram was the icon at Ayodhya. This is where Ravana took away Godavari, Sita, and so on and so forth. So you have philosophy, purpose,
Narrative.
you have icons, you have narratives, and then it goes down to Bengal, where it becomes a delta. It splits into multiple things. I call them the rituals. So then you'll have somebody saying, I am a Bodhi, or I am a Ayyar, or I am an Iyengar, and we'll ring the bell this way and we'll keep the god that way. Rituals. You and I, and everybody, have not done a PhD in Indian mythology. Our grandmothers kept us on her lap, or somebody senior in the family, and told us some story कि दिवाली आता है तो उसका ये मतलब है. And we have learnt. And so your mind is programmed. In a company which is long living, there are rituals which are programmed. See, I worked 31 years in Unilever and Hindustan Lever. I don't know the birthday of William Hesketh Lever. Nobody in Hindustan Lever knows it. If I ask them, they'll say, I don't know. There is no statue or picture of it anywhere except if you go to some archives. You come to Tata, everybody will know Jamshedji Tata was born on 3rd March. Why? Because every year on 3rd March,
there is a...
like Deepavali, something happens.
Yes.
It happens not in one place. It happens all over the world.
But one must see the Jamshedpur one.
Everybody knows the Jamshedpur one is the
phenomenal.
biggest. So it's like saying we have Durga Puja, but in Bengal, in Calcutta, it's a big thing.
It's
but
a big thing.
Durga Puja in Bombay will be a little smaller. It won't be like Calcutta. But they will try to replicate. And likewise, Ganesh Puja and so on and so forth. Everybody will know JRD's birthday because there is something held called JRD QV, and it's got a name, some rituals. So PINR, purpose, icons, narratives, and rituals are very important in a company. And this is not about people who are alive. You know, Lalaji started this company 20 years ago. Everybody will ring a bell on his birthday. It's not what I'm referring to.
Of course.
I'm talking of the long-standing, the way. And you see this in religions. You see this in philosophies. You see this in companies. It's exactly the same. And how did Christianity or Islam or Hinduism or Buddhism went all the way from Gaya, past the Hindu Kush mountain, past the Taklaman desert, into China. China nearly became a Buddhist country around 650, 700 CE. How did it go? Because there were pilgrims.
Yeah.
Because there were icons like Huan Sang who came, who carried back the tales. So I think it's a very fascinating thing for companies to learn about long life from rivers and religions, which is the subject of my next book.
Yeah, no, the last 10 minutes, there is just so many insights that you are able to articulate. Just before I come back to the Tatas and levers one more time, you've also spoken about, this phenomena of the value versus the valuation mindset that we see so often these days. So one looks a lot more long term, one is a lot more short term. When we look at the startup ecosystem, it's a lot more towards many of them go towards the whole valuation mindset. And just to share, as looking at a interesting statistics, S&P 500, which is the largest market valuation based US companies, the average tenure of a company in S&P 500 measured back in 1965, 66, around that time frame, was about 35 years. That number today is down to almost 11 or 12 years. That's how much it has come down. So the tenure of a S&P 500 itself has come almost like 4x. Now, if we come back to, let's say, the valuation versus value mindset, thinking about somebody who's building a company right now, how does one see that? And then I'll come back into levers and Tatas. I have a couple of questions on that.
It's an interesting point to think about. When I began my career, which I agree was quite some time back, but not, I wasn't Aurangzeb's classmate or something. Not quite that old.
But you've seen a lot.
You've seen a lot, and we didn't know valuation. We never even bothered about valuation. Although Hindustan Lever was a public company. We were always driven on value. Is your XYZ soap or shampoo or whatever you're selling giving the consumer something which is better than competition? What can you do? Can you do R&D? Can you brand better? Can you advertise better, etc., etc.? This whole valuation thing is probably 50, 60 years old and it's gradually become like like that Bengali film, Oshani Shanket, the distant thunder,
Right.
and it's gradually become louder and louder.
Right.
Where is it driven from?
Yeah.
It is driven by the desire to make money quickly. Finance became cheap in the 70s, 80s, gradually. The whole dictionary of finance changed. And private equity and new terminology started coming up, which wanted money to be multiplied very fast. And if you want to multiply money fast, you wanted to buy and sell. You had a trading mentality rather than a long-term mentality. That has become ingrained. Now many young people grow up thinking that's the only way to run business. You have companies which have investor relations department which think it's all about quarterly earnings. They can't think anything else. Now, that's a natural progression of how ideas develop and grip people's minds. And that's how valuation has become. So today you have startups who are promoted by venture capitalists who want an exit in 7 years or 10 years. And if you can be $1 billion or $2 billion, unicorn, decacorn, they got various names for it, then they exit. Then what happens? They don't care. So I believe it's within some limits. It has been disruptive, it has been positive, it has brought benefits. But its larger institutional and ecological impact has been quite negative. Because it changed people's mindset to think that the purpose of starting a startup is that you must build up its valuation very fast.
Right.
And then you can raise cheap finance or sell it or whatever.
Right.
It is the equivalent of in any community, anywhere in the world. If a baby is born in some relation's house, people will go there and they will say, Dirghayush Bhava.
Right.
You would wish the child long life.
Right.
I've never known anybody in any community to go and say, I hope your child becomes 100 kilos by the time he's 10 years old.
Right.
There will be an unhealthy child.
Right.
But that's what we do to companies. We generate companies who want to get valuation within 5 years. I don't see, companies are living beings. They are not inanimate objects. I strongly believe if you take a rationalistic view of companies, you'll say they're inanimate objects. They are run by shareholders for their benefit. But if you take a botanical or a biological view, you say this is a chalta firta real asti. It's got life, it's got ambition, it's got hope, it's got despair. And that's what this company is all about. And if I look at Levers or Tatas, which have been around a long time, that's the essence of it. We never think about valuation. We think of how are we creating value. I wrote a book called Wisdom for Startups from Grown-Ups, trying to bring forth this point of view. But the torrent of view about valuation is very strong.
Yeah.
But since you asked me, I'm expressing my view
Yeah. Yeah.
that if I come and said that, why do you breathe? You say, I need oxygen in my lungs. And then I say, how do you get your oxygen? And you'll say, well, I breathe air. I say, what's the percentage of oxygen in the air? 18%, 20%. Shall I give you 100% pure oxygen? And will you become big faster? You'll die actually. Valuations will kill companies. And there's evidence of it. You'll always quote some example which is the exception. But the world doesn't run on exceptions.
Yeah.
One Einstein, but everybody thinks he's an Einstein.
Yeah.
So you screw it up.
Yeah.
So I have a very, it may be called conservative, foolish, I don't know what other people would call it, your viewers would call it. But I believe that if you want, long life is a criterion for companies. And long life, which has a purpose, is a criterion for companies. And if it takes you longer to nurture them, that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
But short life and quick value
yeah.
cannot be a formula for companies.
Yeah.
It may turn out that way,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
yeah.
that's not the way to do
Yeah,
it.
and we often only see the successful ones, but
Exactly.
we don't see the whole 95% maybe which is underneath that never. I want to go also to a very important topic of which you've had tremendous amount of experience, which is the role of the board and the composition, responsibilities, etc. But into that is through Tatas and Levers. Tatas about like 160 years, Levers 100 years. Do you even think that such institutions are possible in the current valuation environment, or have we actually gone past that type of an era where such institutions were built? Do you see that possibility now, or do you even see companies that are actually thinking in the right way? The point about PINR, how do you see that?
No, I do see companies thinking in the right way. And many family managed businesses,
Yeah, that's interesting.
which are not necessarily well known.
Yeah.
You come with me to Coimbatore, I'll take you to the Naidus, I'll take you to the Gounders.
Yeah.
Come with me to Chennai, I'll take you to the Chettiars.
Yeah.
Come with me to Gujarat, I'll take you to the Kachi Bhatiyas.
They're extremely long term.
Very, very long term. Very long term.
Yeah.
And all of them may not be equally successful, you may debate it, but they think very long term. Because they think that this is a family riyasat which they are building up. They may not be well known like Tata's, Godrej, Bajaj. These are very well known.
Right.
I call them the big giants because they are well known. Infosys,
Yeah.
Wipro.
Yeah.
But small giants are very valuable. I'll just throw a little statistic at you. India has, according to the MSME data, something like 63 million enterprises. 63 million. You can't even imagine it.
Whoa.
That includes two-man partnership. Your firm will be included in that, for example.
Yeah. 6
Fine.
crores.
There's 6 crores, okay? Of them, how many have capital of 10 crores or more? 19,000.
Wow.
Out of 63 million,
19th.
19,000. So 62 point something are all. I'm not saying this in a bad sense. I don't want you to misunderstand, but they are one man, two man shops.
Yeah.
They don't.
Yeah.
And of the 19,000, how many are listed? 4, 5,000. Of the ones that are listed, how many account for 60%, 70% of the market value? 200. Now just imagine, your pygmy land, a lot of small little ants with just maybe 10, 20, 30 giants. Giants in relation to the
Yeah.
ants around.
Yeah, the 63.
What India needs, in my view, and what I think our industrial policy has lacked in the past, there have been wonderful things about our industrial policy, don't get me wrong, is creating what I call sustainable, humane, and enlightened enterprises. I call them she enterprises. Sustainable,
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
humane,
Yeah.
and enlightened. And what sustainability means, you can go on and on debating. What humane means, you can go on and on debating. And what enlightened means, you can go on and on debating. But they are very powerful words.
Yeah, extremely.
You know, in 1893, when Swami Vivekananda, who's one of the guys I do admire, went to US, American businessmen who attended his sessions said, you know, Swamiji, you're saying all sorts of obtuse things that we don't relate with. We are all businessmen. Tell us how we should run our business. I'm, of course, caricaturing and summarizing. Swamiji said it in a very different way. But he said you have to do only 4 things. To me, this is the Brahma Mantra of long life companies. Now, what he said, number 1 is become self-aware. Because your enemy is not your competitor, your enemy is yourself. Your ego, your blind spots. Be self-aware. I'm adding my words to it. Swamiji didn't use. The second thing that he said is protect your resources that enable you to do business. And when they said, what resources are you talking about? Swamiji said, I mean people, soil, air, water. This is long before sustainability was being talked about, 1893. Third thing he said, serve others before you serve yourself. Seva. Don't become greedy, which is the message in the current context. And the fourth and the last is you take firm decisions but implement them with compassion. Now, can you imagine a monk in the way, traveling for the first time abroad in 1893 saying this? And to me, this should be the primer of management. This is Eastern wisdom. Now, you try saying this to people who believe that profit is the only thing, valuation is the only thing. You'll be talking double Dutch to them. I mean, they just won't accept it. They'll think you've gone bonkers. But I believe these are powerful messages coming out of, for lack of a better word, I'm calling it Eastern wisdom. You'll find this in Japan. Why do you think the world's longest lasting companies are Japanese? 400 years, 700 years old. Why do you think they are in India? The family managed businesses that we have. So I think there is a merit in looking at long life, sustainability, people orientation as the monikers of great companies rather than valuation. And those add up to value.
Yeah. No, this is amazing, and I can't help but link these 4 with what you stated just before, which is the purpose, the icons, the narrative, and the ritual. You get these things together, and this is powerful.
I'm not a Hindu chauvinist. I'm a good Hindu like many people, but I'm not a chauvinist. But why has the Hindu religion been the longest surviving? Because the religion is very, very adaptable.
Yeah.
And it says you do it your way. There's no particular way.
Yeah.
Why did Gautam Buddha become so appealing? When he sat under the Bodhi tree in Gaya, he said, if you don't agree with me, debate it with me.
Yeah.
You're encouraging dissent and disagreement.
Yeah.
Follow me only if you're convinced. If you're not convinced, take your own path. How many religions say that?
Yeah.
Very, very few. Very few. I don't want to talk about
Yeah.
other religions and don't want to create a controversy. But the Indic religions, if I may use that word, say exactly the same thing in their own little ways with the times in which they were propagated. Say, be very flexible, be adaptable, be open to other people's ideas, be self-aware, you're the master of your destiny. And I think that does applies as much to business. And I very much like to see an Eastern orthodoxy coming to Indian businesses. Since we are talking of Indian business, many foreigners may not understand all this.
Yeah.
But they will not fail to think of its appeal.
Yeah.
They may find it difficult to implement this in America.
Yeah.
I'll tell you when I used to say this, when I used to visit after Tata's acquired various companies, they would say, what is the Tata philosophy and all, and I went around talking to companies. They said, is it possible what you're saying? I said, come to Jamshedpur. Just once, 3rd March.
Yeah.
Just see it's possible.
Yeah.
So it is possible. I think there are companies in India that are demonstrating it. Some of them are large giants, some of them are small giants. And we don't celebrate it enough. And I'd very much like to see this become the basis of an MBA. Not by going back to putting a tikka on your forehead. If you want to do that, that's up to you.
Yeah.
But by saying these are values which are very, very important if you want to build long-lasting business.
No, this is amazing. So much wisdom in what you just stated. Let me go to another topic now, which is the role of the board, especially for, let's say, chief exec running a company. It's almost 4 decades that you've been on various boards, you've managed, you've shaped, you've strategized. But interestingly, in one of your books, you talk about the whole phenomena of going in circles. You speak about the fly. It is amazingly well sort of put together. You talk about the single versus compound eye. Please, if you can elaborate on that matter.
No, I was motivated to inquire into why in every company, whether it's Lever, Tata or any other company, people up there think it's crystal clear. People down there think, why is there so much chaos? Both are looking at exactly the same object. And what are they seeing different? Whether it's in government, public sector or in private sector. And here's an answer I came to. I got every monsoon in Bombay, those who live here know that if you keep the window open, the flies come in. And they're buzzing around your tea, coffee, and a very nuisance. Why does the fly go around in circles? I then looked at I stumbled upon, I shouldn't say I looked at as though I researched it. I looked at the construction of the eye of the fly. Fly, wasp, bees, they all have a similar construction. They are one species. And unlike the human eye, where we have 2 eyes, which are called simple eyes, and they can move around. I can look left and right. The fly can't do that. The fly has 2,000 eyes on this side and 2,000 eyes on this side. So imagine each of these is a crystal of glass. And 2,000 to 4,000 eyes. All in, this is called microelectronics. And so if a fly sees a pot of honey over there, whereas I can turn around and walk bodily towards that honey, the fly can't do that. So the fly sets out on a journey with that particular lens operating. So the only way that it can do is to go around in circles, like an aeroplane landing in Bombay airport.
Amazing.
In a circle, and then it swoops down. Okay? And what happens in a company or a government or any institution is that the people out there, the salesman, the accounts clerk, the depot clerk, they are going around in circles, and their perception is that that's what the leadership wants you to do, because they want to get you to the pot of honey. Whereas, and all of them are seeing different pots of honey. The leadership up there saying it's pretty straightforward, turn your eye and move your body there. So it's the difference between a compound eye and a simple eye. And one of the great challenges of leadership in managing the future, embracing the future, etc., is to be able to communicate. Every CEO thinks he has communicated his vision very clearly to the troops, and yet they don't seem to understand. They are approximately as dumb as you were 20 years ago, or as smart. Okay?
Right.
So they are not dumb.
Right.
You have to understand that in this process, as you lower down you go, the more compound the I becomes. And so you'll have to find a way to help people to focus rather than tell them that they're going around in circles, they're dealing. Even as a CEO, when I was one, I think I'm guilty. Sometimes I say, hey, I've explained this so many times, haven't you understood? And in the process, you really disturb that guy's peace of mind because nobody wants to be told in public in front of 20 people or 100 people, haven't you understood? Our vision is to be, some bombastic statement I'll make. CEOs do this all the time. But people don't necessarily implement it. So I think we have to understand that the board or the CEO thinks they got a compounder, a simple I. But down the line,
It's compound.
people have got a compounder because they're all
Yeah.
coming from different points of view.
Yeah.
So if I say, I want to cut down my working capital,
Yeah.
we are spending too much working capital compared to my competition. That looks a very clear statement from the top.
From the top.
The depot fellow says, I must get less stock. The sales fellow says, I must recover my money faster from the customer. The purchasing fellow says, I must delay my payments to my vendor. Now you created 3 new diseases.
Yeah. Yeah.
By
And
trying
they'll
to
go
solve
around
one
in-
problem.
Yeah.
And you go around in circles. So vendors start complaining, customers start complaining, banks, you go and finance things, they must go and screw the banks and discount it faster. So you create all sorts of complications. Now I'm not saying it's a wrong thing to do, but you have to think more holistically and systemically.